So I've been in Canada for about 17 years now, and ever since I come, I was kind of always in testing and quality assurance. And I changed quite a few companies for different reasons, mostly because they were acquired by somebody else or, decided to reorg or something. And I ended up with CentralOne about 5 years ago. I started there as a replacement for a person who went on parental leave. And they really liked what I've done, so they opened a managerial position for me there. And so I, continued working and continued developing the team. When I started, there was, I think, about only 8 testers. Now we are at 22. Well, sorry, 20, and I'm hiring for 2 more, so it's going to be 22. So let me start with the presentation. So what we're going to talk today about, who are we? I'll show you our organizational charts within product development and also our test team, so that you have a bit of a perception of who are we, and how we fit within the organization. And then we'll talk a little bit about software testing at CentralOne. Who are our clients? What are the applications that we test? What testers do at CentralOne? Recently, we've been also transitioning to Agile, so I'll touch a little bit on that and how that went. And I'll talk about Agile test strategy template that we introduced. I'll touch a little bit on test cases and test results in Agile, and then how we deal with the changes, how we track the changes. And then our last slide will be about our member direct product and release process, which is the most defined within the organization. I'll definitely leave some questions for Q&A at the end, so you'll have the opportunity to ask. However, if you feel that you want to ask something throughout the presentations, you're most welcome to do so as well. So the first slide will be a YouTube video from CentralOne. And I apologize, I didn't know we didn't have very good sound. So I'll ask you to keep a little bit quiet. The back rows, you might not fully clear hear it. But let's try to do our best with this. And it's not starting.
CentralOne is a provider of wholesale financial and trade association services to credit unions. Credit unions are cooperative financial institutions, and we understand them. We help them to be leaders in their fields, and we share common core values. This is why we are the preferred partner of credit unions across Canada. To us, these values aren't just words on paper. They mean a lot, and when we demonstrate them in everything we do, it reinforces the connection we have with our members. It's this common thread that makes us different, but we couldn't do it without you, the distinctive leaders in your own areas of expertise here at CentralOne. We implement these values in our day-to-day operations because when we do, great things happen for all of us. Here's what happened one day. On a customer service call with Lisa, a credit union employee, Jim had this would make banking so much better, smarter, faster. It would revolutionize member relations and not only help Lisa, but the members she serves as well. It was doable, but he knew he couldn't pull it off alone. This needed to be backed up by some solid facts. Megan is great with numbers. In fact, Megan thinks that math is fun, so she lent her expertise to the project. It didn't take her long to work out the numbers, but she wanted to make sure it had the seal of approval, so she took it to Khalid. Khalid has a great eye for detail. He gave it a thorough once-over. It was good in his books, but it was still a bit too technical. Alex has a knack for copywriting. He can turn any information into a logical, user-friendly document. He loved it and knew we could help. Though Alex already had a lot on his plate, he made sure to honor his commitment. Was almost ready. But who would help the credit unions sell it to their members? Neither neither Jim, Megan, Khalid, nor Alex was particularly comfortable with public speaking. Mei Lin, however, is a terrific public speaker and was the perfect person to present the project. She thought of an exciting and energetic way to present to credit unions and various partners. The pitch was a success, and the credit unions were excited to implement into their daily operations. It made things better, smarter, faster for credit unions, and made the Central One team feel proud, inspired, and accomplished. As you can see, everyone at Central One plays a part of the big picture. We have leaders at all levels, like you. What you do every day supports credit unions and our customers from coast to coast. From spark to strategy to implementation, we are passionate about what we do, and we take our commitment seriously. We don't just set objectives, we achieve them. It's this cooperative spirit that drives our relentless pursuit of value and growth in partnership with credit unions every day. And that's the definition of Central One.
So I hope that slide gave you a little bit of overview of what Central One does in a kind of cute, animated way. This is a product of our marketing department. So, why is this not going now? So I'll talk a little bit about product development. We have AVP product development is Chloe Morrow, and she has 5 direct reports, a little bit more, but 5 major ones. Renee Gurley is the director of development. They have a team of 53 developers, without Renee included. So the teams are without their managers, the sizes specified there. Kelly West is director of product management, and it's team of 21. Ata Imami is director of project and portfolio management, and there's 17 of them there. And then I'm managing a software and testing team, currently 19, with me 20, and as I said, we're going to be hiring 2 more very soon. We also have a planning and process manager that reports to Chloe, and then she has a couple of admin assistants to help with daily operations. Now, the test team that I manage, I have 2 team leads, Veronica Matias and Renato Fala, and I have a senior tester, Thomas, and also under my wing is the release management, but only release management for Member Direct. I'll talk a little bit about our products a little bit later. So Member Direct is the most complex and most kind of demanding as far as the releases, and I'll touch on releases for that one. So release of that product is under me. Other releases are sitting within different departments within Central One. I also have 1 person on contract. He used to be a team lead, but he moved to East Coast, so we kept him with us, so he's working remotely. Veronica and Renato have each 7 testers, different levels, as you can see. And even though they're divided in 2 groups, they don't necessarily support our streams per se, because of the high demand of the projects that we have. Very often happens that some people from this team will actually work on the projects that Veronica is kind of overseeing, or the other way around. Some from Veronica's team will work on the projects that Renato is overseeing. That helps with a little bit of cross-pollination of the knowledge between the teams, and it doesn't keep team being very silos. I also think it helps testers to be a little bit more engaged in overall operations rather than being very, narrowly specialized in just one product. To me, as a manager, this also gives the flexibility to move people around, and I think for testers, it keeps them interested. Because I think people, after a while, if they keep doing the same job over and over and over again, it becomes a little bit kind of boring. I can proudly say that I have a 0 turnover on my team. So since I've been here, the employee satisfaction is quite high. Last year was 88%, the average corporate was 76%. So, people tend to be satisfied with the work that we do. And they continue doing it, so that's, that's the best part of it. So let's talk a little bit about testing at Center1. Who are our clients? As you saw from the short movie, we are working very closely with credit unions. We support a little bit over 300 credit unions, and I obviously didn't put all their logos up here. It would take me forever to do that. But in addition to credit unions, we also work with other financial institutions, like Laurentian Bank from Canada, or Canadian Tire, or Fortis BC, Canadian Western Bank, Alterna Bank, and so on. So obviously on the market we are quite recognized, even with other institutions. We are not trying to be only related to credit unions. For credit unions, we, in addition to our product development services, we also provide services, especially for the smaller credit unions, like legal department. They might not have it if they have like 5 employees within that credit union, or I don't know, marketing initiatives, or human resources, and etc. So we are basically serving as a central place for these credit unions to help us, to help them excel in their business. And when you look at very small credit unions, it would be very hard for them to be presented in the market and compete with the big banks. Just for reference, if you didn't know, we recently, we actually were first in Canada to do the remote deposit with taking the photo of your check. And ING was very upset because we were the ones doing it. Actually, we did it, but one of our credit unions implemented and was first in the market with that. So applications that we test, as you can see this, I didn't list all of them. Again, it would be quite a long list, but I just wanted to give you a high-level overview. The 3 main streams that we have is a Member Direct stream. This is our online banking suite. There we have different applications: Member Direct Integrated, Member Direct Online, Member Direct Business, Member Direct Small Business. PFM is a recent project that we've done where we are revamping the Member Direct product line, and we're doing personal financial management. So basically when you log in, you will be able to see where you're spending, trends and analysis. Did you spend too much on, eating out? And then it's kind of glaring in your face and you're like, oh my God, I should stop doing this. Or, you maybe went and treat yourself too much, in a month. So it just comes directly in your online banking application. In addition to that, we're also developing mobile application and mobile web. So we also have IVR that's all interrelated. So if you make a payment, for example, online, you will see that in your web app, it will all be interconnected. If you make it over IVR, it will be reflected on your app and mobile web, as well as your desktop application. In addition to this stream, we also have a payment stream, which relates more to the back-end processing of different payments applications. So we might have automated fund transfer, customer automated fund transfer, billing system, paper clearing, money transfer, currency ordering system. USACH is the pension application for people that are in US to receive pension from here, from Canada, and so on. The third stream is our corporate stream, and for this one we do treasury and finance requests from those departments, some intranet applications, or we might do some services for marketing. I think recently marketing had the initiative about credit unions are helping here, so we were involved to help with the design of the application and the presence on the web for that. And then in addition to all this, we have ongoing support streams for each of these streams and applications. So as you can imagine, it gets really complex and complicated and quite demanding. As I told you before, we recently started to move to Agile. We were strictly a waterfall shop before, but we found that we were a little bit struggling with, waiting for the requirements to be completed, and then design to be completed, and then development to be completed, and then it comes to testing, and we're like, but you're missing a requirement, so back to square one, right? So it felt like never-ending process, and so we wanted to speed it up. And we moved toward Agile. Not all projects are yet Agile. We are still in transition, and we don't have everything defined yet. The thing is that it is quite challenging. With that many applications that we have to support, it becomes quite challenging to just turn the key and say, tomorrow we're becoming an Agile shop. Also, Agile is not something that you're going to do overnight. So we had a teacher from Software Productivity Center who was on site with us for quite some time and helped initial projects to move slowly to Agile and transition to Agile and understand what is it that we need to do. We also do some risk-based testing because as we were moving to Agile, and even during the waterfall development, it's becoming really hard to do the regression test of all these applications. As you could see from the previous slide where I said Member Direct encompasses all these MDI, MDO, MDB, MDSB. If you make a change in login, for example, a lot of these applications might be affected, and you need to regression test them. So if you try to do that very frequently, it will become a little bit of a challenge. And then you cannot just say, let's say you make the change in one of these applications, all of them will be affected, let's regression test everything. So we can't do that. It's just too much time consuming. We do have some automation, and I'll touch a little bit on that later. But at the same time, excuse me, at the same time, we need to move the things forward. So we do some risk-based testing where the change is narrowly specified, what it was, and then we determine who are the clients that we need to test for. The complex thing also is that we really don't have the test environment that we own. And that might come as a surprise to many of you. The thing is that we have the front end, the web-facing end, but because the credit unions have their own banking systems, and there is about a little bit over a dozen different ones that are out in the market, they actually own the banking host in their house. So we have to connect from our web interface to their banking host and acquire the test accounts and test data from them. And as you can imagine, that becomes a bit of an operation on its own. So the test environment management is not under my team. We have an operations team that handles that and works with the clients to enable us that. Release manager is putting the builds on our side, so Member Direct related builds, he's dealing with those, but the back end is something that's outside of our control. And sometimes it happens that we are in the middle of the test and credit unions decide that they're gonna refresh their database. And then all of a sudden you don't have the accounts and you don't have the data. And so we have to engage different groups, including client support or operations or even our test team to phone them and sort things out. So the types of the tests that we do, we have some manual and some automated tests. The automated tests that we have are mostly on the Member Direct side. We do have some on the payments side, but not as rigorous and not as frequently executed as what we do for the Member Direct. The automation is mainly done for our basic verification test, which we run for every build. And we also have some automation regression test, we call it ART, for 5 credit unions that we do on a cyclical basis. So when we get the build, we don't execute ART for all 5 credit unions, but we might do 1 week for one and next week for the next one and so on. It just helps with the managing of the process, because even though you might have the automation, as I said, we don't own the test accounts, so some of your test cases might fail. And if they do fail, you might not know whether it's because the script is not working or whether this is because the banking host was down. And so, because that's a challenge, we're trying to kind of offset and find a good balance where we get a good value for what we do. We also do some functional tests and non-functional tests. Non-functional tests that we execute are performance tests. As you can see, load test is not there. Load test is done by our operations team again, because they own servers, so they can put more load on the server and they can test it that way. But we try to do some volume spike, endurance, benchmark, capacity, stress, depending on what is it that the client requires, or what is it that the project requires. We also do some limited security testing. For MemberDirect, we do yearly 1 complete security test, and that's done again with outside of my team. We actually, I think we outsource to another organization to do it for us. Visual test, obviously. So as we have that many credit unions that we need to support, as we go through testing, we might just notice slight differences. One of the things that we don't test is the content. The content is very hard because it's very customizable and it's very specific for certain credit union. So we might not necessarily know what color they used or what font they used or what's in the, description of the services that they do. So that's becoming really hard for us to do. It's not impossible, but the only thing is that in that case, credit unions should be able to give us what is it that they expect so that we can comply to their expectations and we can make sure that that's what they want. So we do some visual tests, right? Like if something is really obviously wrong, if the text on the button is kind of leaking out, or things are overlapping and just visually doesn't look good, yeah, that's fine, but it's very limited. Same thing with limited accessibility tests and localization tests. So because we support credit unions and financial institutions across Canada, we have a few clients that are French speaking. And so recently, in particular with one of the clients, they wanted us to test French more. So we are getting into those waters a little bit more. But in essence, mainly testing is done in English. Only on the request is done for French. So transition to Agile. When we talk about Agile, a lot of people are like, you don't need any documentation. Let's just go and do it. And if you are in the regulation industry, like financial industry or healthcare, that's not necessarily true. You still have to have some documentation. The thing is that most of the time, auditors will not ask you for specific things that they want, but they will ask you for things that you said you're going to be doing. So if you say that you're going to be, testing certain things in a certain way, you better have something to support that, because for me, just to say, well, Thomas told me he did it, so I just trust him, it will not work, right? So there should be some trace. Prior to Agile, in the waterfall development, we had a Word document, and we had a formal sign-off. And it's a bit of a tedious process. It takes time, it's a Word document, you don't have tracking, and it's a little bit hard. So we decided we're going to move into something lighter. And we went into creating a template for Agile test strategy on Confluence. Confluence is something that we use in our day-to-day basis for pretty much documenting everything. And we found that when you have document on Confluence, first it's available to everybody. Anybody can go and edit. Second, you can go and provide a template to your team. During sprints, they can decide, oh, this is what we need to cover, or we don't know yet, we'll do it later. So they have a little bit of leeway to basically not do everything at once, and they might fill out this document, have it as a living document on Confluence, and fill it out a little bit later as they go through. We do intend to try to fill it as much as possible initially, just so that we agree to certain things, and that there is no a disagreement between the team members about, we said we're going to do that, but we haven't done it. When you document it, even if it's one sentence, we all know what is it that we're going to do. So makes it clear. So things, I took this template here to show it to you, and I don't know how well you guys in the back can see, but I'll try to read at least the main titles, so just so you get the idea of what is it that we cover in the strategy. So initially, we would just give the test objectives and overall approach. What is it that we want to do in regards to testing activities? Not necessarily what is the project objective. We also want to talk about the test scope. So what's in the test scope and for the project under test? What is it that you need to do when you're testing? What's included and what's not included? Systems in scope. As I showed you before, it's really hard for us, especially on the member direct side, to just say, well, let's test everything. We can't. So it's very important to specify which particular applications we would want to test. With mobile and with credit unions that are lacking IT departments, they always kind of a little bit behind with upgrades to newer versions of operating systems and newer versions of browsers, and it's becoming increasingly hard to try to support them all, right? So we need to determine what is it that we want to do as far as browser and operating systems. And we have a list separate from the test strategy that we just referred to. This list gets updated every 6 months by product management, and it gets reviewed in our product cub meetings, just so that we make sure that across the board we're all on the same page. Adam, again, for the mobile platforms that are supported, as you can imagine, with mobile devices, it's becoming really a nightmare. And I do admire my testers, and I praise them for that, because when it comes to testing mobile, it can be quite challenging. We haven't reached the stage yet where we have things automated for mobile. But even if you do, the things that we tried out, we noticed that when you do test something with the simulators or emulators, it's not necessarily true that it will work with a real device. And so the last pass, regardless of what you do, the last pass needs to be done on the device. And because I talked about risk-based testing, when the change comes and when it requires testing for a certain client on a certain devices, that's something that we need to do manually. And then we talk about which languages are supported. So as you can imagine, not all projects might be on English and in English and French, so we need to define that. This is something that's a little bit more, I should say, maybe compressed, but it gives you a good idea of what are the types of tests that are required to be done within the whole project. And we usually want developers to do unit test and component test. With the component test, we didn't have so much success so far. We're trying to push for it, and every strategy I kind of try to sneak it in. Development is not used into doing component tests as much. So, but they are willing. There is a goodwill to develop automation a little bit further. And so that's something where we need to get Again, for the project, we might have some new features, and then we might have just a feature regression test that we need to do. For example, if we change the account summary page, I don't necessarily have to test the whole member direct, right? Like I can just test that feature. But if I make a total revamp like we did with PFM, our personal financial management application, in some cases we might be required to do a full regression of the products. Then here we have accessibility test, and we have limited, as I said before, as per guidelines. So we keep guidelines somewhere outside so that they don't clutter the strategy, but at least you refer to them if you need to do the accessibility test. And then we also have security test that's limited. Full security test for member direct is done annually, as I mentioned before. Performance test. So our operations, or they changed the name now, so they are called application management team. They might be doing a bit more performance testing, a bit more detailed performance testing if required. And then UAT, who's going to be doing that. And we usually have on our projects, we have something we call project champion. So that's one of the credit unions that volunteers to participate in our projects, and they actually, we want to involve them to do the UAT for us. Then the thing is, we need to specify what's out of test scope, because if you don't, very often it comes to bite you. So it's kind of a little bit of a safety net for a tester to understand what not to test as well as what you need to test. Any assumptions and risk and mitigations, I think, need to be specified, because if you work under certain assumptions, your results might be different. If you expect certain risks and you know how to mitigate them, your outcome might be better. But as long as we all know what these are, it's good to list them out. Very often you might have similar assumptions and risk and mitigations for similar products. So something I'm working currently on is to redo the standards that I had before to fit better with this test strategy and outline those common risks and common assumptions. Like assumption that the developer will do the unit test. I don't need to specify it every time if I have it in standard, for example. And so I could then list that in the standard and just refer to here and say as per standard, and then add additional ones that are a little bit out of the scope. Any dependencies you might want to specify. In our case, as you notice, the projects are intertwined. So you might have a dependency on one project before you finish your own project, right? So they might need to complete certain feature, and then only you can do your work. So it's actually good to list that out, because that will kind of make you work with another team and push you forward to talk to them and really make sure that you are all on the same page. Test environments. Oh, this is something that we all are challenged with at Central One. So it's very important for us to list the test environments that we're going to be using. Later on, when I talk a little bit about member direct release process, you will see what I'm referring to. Because even with the web-facing environments, we have a little bit of complexity. And then on top of that, when you add banking hosts that are sitting with different credit unions, and when you add the different third parties that we might work with, it just adds to complexity of it. So it's good to specify where you want to test. And then test accounts, test data kind of all relates to that. So the top part up until you come to release specific things is mostly something you can do at your sprint zero. Most of those things could be defined at sprint zero, more or less. You might have some things that you still don't know, but I would say probably good 70–80% could be filled at sprint zero. Now, once when you get into release specifics, you might not necessarily know what is it that you want to do. And that will depend on the stories that you want to cover within your release. So once when you have the stories that you want to cover and epics that you want to have, these will be covered we keep our stories and epics in Jira, and we also keep them in Confluence. So we kind of try to integrate those tools together and reference them so that we have a good connection between the things. Once when you have that, then you can determine which type of test you want to do and at what sprints you want to do them. You don't necessarily have to specify sprint 1, sprint 2, sprint 3. It becomes a bit too cumbersome to do. So if you just say development sprints, which are usually your 1 to 3 sprint, right, or 4, depending how many you have within the release, and the 5th sprint is your last sprint, that would be usually your stabilization sprint. So you could specify you would do it that way, right? And your regression, you might not want to do it at sprint 1. There's nothing to regression test yet. So you will wait until that period in time. And at the end, I think it's important to specify the quality objectives. What is it that how you know that you are done, right? How you exit. So for UAT gate, we suggested, and because this is a template, we suggested that we will have all items in test scope have successfully been completed, for example, and we don't have any severity bugs that are severity 1 bugs that are outstanding, and we could say less than number of percentage of severity 2 bugs are outstanding. And this could vary from the project to project, depending on what the product management is comfortable with and what is it that they are okay with. Production gate, same thing. You want your UAT to be successfully completed, so your project champions need to be happy with the work that we did. And we would say there's no severity 1 or 2 bugs outstanding, and then maybe less than 5% or number-wise, whatever you come up with. Okay, test cases. So test cases in Central 1 are done mostly in Silk Central Test Manager. Oh, it's a long name. I always have a hard time. We also have automated and manual tests, and automated tests are done in Silk Test. However, they are executed through Silk Central Test Manager, and the results are kept there. It's becoming a little bit too complicated with my team. I tried for the last 5 years to use Silk a little bit better, and it's definitely a powerful tool. However, for what we use it, I find it's based on the feedback that I get from my team, I find it's a bit cumbersome. And especially when you have to support that many credit unions and then very specific features for certain credit union. Login is different on Vancity than it's on Coast and so on. And it becomes a little bit hard to manage it that way. Also, when you try to create your test executions, it's kind of hard. It's all over the place. It's too many things at once. So we are looking and trying to simplify things and just to support Agile a little bit more and a little bit better. Because we have everything on Confluence and in Jira, one of the things that we are looking for manual or for actually just creating test cases is Zephyr for Jira. We haven't started the evaluation yet, so I can't talk about that. I don't know how our experience will be with it. We just started to look at that tool just because of the current platforms that we have. And sometimes when you have, like Jira and Confluence have been working well for us. So trying to find something that is already related to that is definitely easier than trying to find a tool that maybe will connect and maybe will not connect, and then I'll end up with the same problem that I have with Silk right now, where I don't have any traceability of the requirements, and I don't know what's being covered and what's not being covered. And the same thing for automation. So Silk Test is powerful, but Silk Test community is quite small. And there's not that much information that we found that we could use. It also used proprietary language, so it's becoming really hard for our team members to learn it on their own. It's not as simple. And if you have development experience, yes, maybe you could pick it up, but still, there are differences in syntax in the language that's used by Silk. I think recently they started to support different languages as well, but we kind of already trying to jump off the bandwagon and try to find something different. So we were looking into Selenium WebDriver for our automation. We had some good tries with it. We're trying now to work with development to work closely together on those, and hopefully it will get us somewhere. I'm looking forward to that because it will definitely make everybody's lives easier. And this is something I came up with down here that hasn't been implemented yet, but when I talk about intermediary test cases and when I talk about permanent test cases, so when the testers test in Agile, in first release in in sprint 1 and maybe to sprint 3, if we have 5 sprints in a release, they might not have test cases that will be used later on, but you need to have acceptance criteria satisfied, right? So you might come up with these temporary test cases that will confirm that your acceptance criteria is good to go, but you will never use them later on. So not necessarily every case is like that. At one point you will get to the test cases that will be fully complete and that you could use later on in your regression. So those are the ones that I would consider permanent ones, and those are the ones that I would move to a repository. So it's something that we need to kind of start working on and move forward to, because as you know, I'm pretty sure I saw a profile of most of you are in testing. There's some people that are in development, but when you have too many test cases, it becomes really hard to manage, and it's really, I'm not sure that you're getting the value that you would want to get from. Some test cases also, after a while, they become stale, especially if you don't do any updates to that piece of code. So do you really need 50 different conditions on that one test case that will, nobody touched the code for a while? I'm not sure, right? So it's determining what's the good balance and what's the appropriate test case to be used, I think, is the key to a good set of regression tests going forward. So this is the test case example that we have, and I just wanted to show you how it looks like in Silk. So on the left side here, we have a project tree, and every time when you go to subfolder and folders and subfolders and deeper, you can get really deep down into what is it that you need to do. And that's why I say it becomes really hard to figure out which test case you need to pick. This screen here is the top part that I just increased so that you can see a little bit better. But it just tells you when this test case was last executed, what is the status, what's the description, what's the test name, and what it was assigned to, which execution plans. So we had it on Alterna, Coast Capital, Demo Easy Savings, Van City, and so on. When you go to the second tab up here to see the steps, that's how it looks like. So you would, for this particular case, you would enter your fund transfer data, you would describe the action, and provide expected results if are applicable to that particular step. As you can see here, we have some $ transfer dash form and $ schedule, $ transfer underscore where in brackets and so on. That's actually data set that we are using so that we don't create test cases for different data sets. So in this tab up here, that says data set, that's what you would see. So for that particular test case, we had the amount of 2 cents and $1 that we wanted to do immediate transfer from account with sufficient funds to any valid account, and in this case was the own account, as they called it. Test results. So we talked a little bit about auditing, and so as far as the test results, you want to make sure that you keep your test results somewhere. Previously, we had integration test result report and system test result report in the waterfall development, and these were quite long and, demanding document. My testers were never happy when they had to write them. So I was thinking of how to make this documentation part a little bit easier, still have something documented, but not to have it so overwhelming. So Jira itself, once when you start using Greenhopper, Jira will have certain reporting areas that you could utilize, and it will give you the sprint overview. So for example, this sprint report will look like that. So within sprint, that was run from 9th of April to 22nd of April, so 2-week period. Red line shows how we close the items in Jira. And these items could be stories, could be bugs, could be mostly stories and bugs for this, for the Agile. And it gives you a good overview. The gray line here that you see is essentially, this is the weekends, the gray lines, the gray kind of columns. But this gray line that goes down here, it kind of shows you how your closeout should happen. And if you have a line, the red line is what actually happened. So if you have a red line that goes straight forward like that and then drops down, it's not a good thing. And the reason why it's not a good thing is because you leave all the work for testers for the last minute and they can't catch up. The whole point with Agile is to start to do that, development and testing faster so that it happens earlier and the things are moved along. The report will also give you what issues are completed, and you'll have what the issue type is here, what the priority is, and what the status is. And it also tells you for the story points how many points you kind of complete. This is just continuation of it, but so the report will also tell you what issues are not complete and what issues were removed from the sprint, because at the end of the sprint you might decide that you just don't have enough time to complete everything, so there are certain things that you want out. So how we do that then in Confluence, that report is great, but it doesn't tell me why we removed certain things or why we deviated from the strategy. So what I ask testers now to do is just to kind of refer to the sprint report in Jira so that you have a reference there, and then write a short blurb about, oh, these are the tickets that we carried over from sprint 4 to sprint 5. And please note, we had problems with the Westminster test environment because it wasn't accessible from April 11 to April 14, for example. Gives you good indication, right? Like if I want to go back and look at the stuff, it's easy enough for people to understand, we have issues with the test environment. What are we going to do about it, right? If I don't keep that information anywhere and I just say it in the meeting, it's the air, it is the word that fills the air. It doesn't bear any, consequence or whatnot. But if after a certain period of time, I can go back and refer and I say, hey, with Westminster, for example, we had the most issues. Let's talk to them. Let's see what we can do. Tracking changes. So in addition to what we have in Jira, we also use ServiceNow. And so we used to defect tracking systems. It's not really defect tracking system. ServiceNow, it's more of a ITIL tool. We use it to report any problems, any incidents that occur in production. So if we notice any issues with our current production systems, that's where the incident will go. This incident will go to incident manager, they will go review it, and then if they determine there is a problem, then they will create the problem ticket within ServiceNow. And then the problem manager will evaluate whether the fix needs to be made or something else has to be done. And if the fix needs to be made, they will create the change order. And what we did, we made a small project where we linked Jira and ServiceNow. So if the work is required to be done by development, then the change orders will be copied over to Jira as bugs. And then they will follow the workflow in Jira that we have. Jira, we use it for various projects. So in Jira, you might have your stories and enhancements. Enhancements, as we move away from the waterfall development, they will go away. So stories will be primary things that we do for the new things that we want to do. Bugs and their fixes. So for those of you who use Jira, bug is the type of issue in Jira that you would be using. And we also use tasks. I specifically put these MRR tickets because that's a specific project in Jira where we keep our support changes and where we keep our regression tickets. So when we get a ticket in Jira, the format is very complex and it gets really overwhelming. We have, I don't even know how many fields, probably about 50 to fill the information on the issue within Jira. And it's easy for people to skip things. We have a special tab that is called Statement of Work. And inside you might have things like who's responsible for new feature test? Who's responsible for regression test? What's in scope for testing? And that's coming into that risk-based testing because we don't necessarily know. For testers, it's really hard when we get a change, it's really hard to understand where this change made the impact. So we depend heavily on developers. The problem is sometimes the developers might not know either because the code is so intertwined that they might not be aware that if they change something on coast, that they impacted Kavarta Credit Union. For example, I'm making things up as I go, but I just want to tell you what the problem what kind of problems we can have. So in our product cabs, we review all these changes, and in product cabs we have BAs or product managers sitting, we have testers sitting, or test leads. We also have release manager there, client support, development leads. So there's a pretty large group of people that are involved in reviewing the changes. And we do review of changes once a week before we have the release. When you have that large of a room, it's very possible that somebody will remember that something had happened sometime in the past and we should test on Alterna because they had issues 2 months ago. And so that's that risk-based change, that risk-based testing that we do. The tickets that why I say MRR tickets, that's a special project in Jira. And usually when the ticket has a new feature, they might also have a regression. So we take that regression part outside and we create MRR ticket. And regression might or might not necessarily be verified by a same tester. It becomes really hard. It becomes really, really complicated. And test leads then, when they get the build, they go and look through all these regression tickets. And then they try to group them so that they belong to the same component. So for example, if Ping is testing login functionality, and if we have like 4 or 5 changes that were affecting the login regression, our test team lead, Veronica, will assign all those changes to Ping, so she could reduce the work. Initially, when we had regression done as part of one ticket, the whole ticket gets assigned to one team member, so you would end up with like 2 or 3 testers doing the same regression. So this helps us a little bit, even though the process, it's a bit complicated. It helps us to kind of extract what's important and just focus on doing things a little bit easier. So let's talk a little bit about our MD, Member Direct Release process. And as you can see, for now, please disregard this project server thing because we are not there yet as far as the process. We do have our trunk where our all code changes are going. We have int server. Int and sys are the names from the waterfall phase, and I think they're going to stay that way until we come up with something different. But initially, the int server, we get the weekly builds, and I'll describe all the builds and changes as I go through the slide. And then we have our sys server, where we try to be at least 2 weeks stable before we go to production server. So what happens on a week 1? Let's say we already have the builds, and these purple and blue arrows, they represent the changes that are coming onto a trunk. They could be project changes, and there could be some support changes. And this happens from many developers, from many projects on a daily basis. And so initially we would have those changes submitted for a week and then get the build up on our integration server and test it for a week. But now, because we are moving to Agile development, we were wanting to get the daily builds. And so what we do is we get the daily build, and the proposal is to put it on the project server. Initially, we thought we could put it up here on the int server, and I think currently we are trying out that phase, but it's becoming a little bit concerning, in particularly on my side, because the regression, the MRR tickets that I mentioned that get extracted as a regression tickets, they will be done only once a week. But you change the build daily on me. So the regression work that we need to do, kind of the time frame shrank from a week into half a day. And it's becoming a little bit unreasonable. So the proposal, the counter proposal we made was actually that we continue building the daily builds on the project server, where I could test my new features. The developers can still submit the changes on a daily basis. We could test new features down here. And then when we get on Wednesday, because our Wednesdays are usually the weekly builds, we would put that build up on the integration server as well. And we would repeat this for the next 2 weeks. But what that gives us is this week time frame where I can actually do the regression still for a week and not be impacted as much. Also, after 4 weeks, there will be something that's called the release candidate branch. So the code will get branched out from trunk up here. And when I have builds, done like this build eventually will end up in production, and you'll see through the flow later on how that moves. But when I do it that way, that gives me certainty that at least the builds I've tested, they've been fully regression tested. If I had these daily builds, I would do a little bit regression here, but a little bit regression here, and a little bit regression here. But maybe this regression affected this regression, and I don't know about it. So I don't have that certainty that when I go to production that everything will work. That certainty doesn't exist with this either, but at least the time frame is a little bit longer, so it gives a little bit more time for a tester to observe the build and give the information to the rest of the team on whether they found something bad with it. So we keep doing that, and when we get to 4th week, this build that we got up here, we're going to be testing it for a week, and then it's going to move to the sys server, where it's going to stay for 2 weeks. In the meantime, we do more changes down here, but we might also, because we are testing up here on this build, if we find the bugs, the commit needs to be made now both to RC branch and to the trunk. Because otherwise, if you don't do it, next release will be without this change, so it will have a bug in it. In that case, we create builds on a sys server that we will use instead of this one. And then we'll continue to test that if required. And so that keeps happening, right? And after week 4, we go to the new cycle. We keep submitting changes down to the trunk. So as you can see, the process down doesn't change as much. We get the builds. Hopefully this week, we didn't find any bugs. Yoo-hoo! And we can do, we have some certainty that the build that goes to production is pretty good. So that's that stabilization we're talking about. However, the 3rd week, so that after 2 weeks, we'll have that, and then we'll give it 1 more week, and it's going to go to production. We continue testing that. Again, if we find issues, we file the bugs, make them fixed, and fix them in both places. And this is only if we find the bugs here. If we find bugs down here, we don't commit them up here. They will end up in the next cycle already in this code, so we'll test it down this way. And so after 2 weeks on sys up here, we will eventually end up with this build in production if there are no bugs, or with the emergency build if there are bugs. That's an overview, high level. Any questions?
What environment are you working with? Windows, Linux?
We are developing on Java. Developers are having mostly Unix stations. Testers are mostly on Windows, just to mimic what the users will be using. And we do have, this is something I'm pushing for. It's, I want to have the ability to have either virtualized environment or on-demand environments. So, if you need XP with i10, I could go create that and then destroy it later on. So that's something that we're working on. Right now, mostly testers are kind of trying to deal with their machines and work on their machines. The problem with that is that they belong under corporate standard. So every once in a while, we get a call from our help desk. We're not supporting XP anymore. Well, too bad. I still have to have at least 1 or 2 machines with XP, because our clients, the small credit unions, only have XP, and they cannot do any better. So we need to support them in their business, and that's how it goes.
And one more question. The stress test which you mentioned, do you use kind of benchmark, or do you have stress automation tools?
It depends on what the project wants. There are some benchmarks that we put through, that we establish, and then after the benchmark is done, then you define whether that fits into that window. It's better or worse than it was before, and so on. Thomas is sitting here. Thomas is also one of our performance testers. So if you have more specific question about how in particular he does performance testing, he's the guy to talk to. You had a question?
You mentioned you have a lot of complexity in your applications and that your backends are actually belong to other people.
Mm-hmm.
Have you looked into or thought of unlocking those backends in a local environment?
We did. We had a few initiatives where we were looking into actually getting the banking server in-house. The cost of it was quite high, so the company decided not to go to that solution. Right now I'm working with Renee, our Director of Product Development, to evaluate some virtualization services. So we had talks with several companies that provide virtualization of the services as a solution. And so that's something we're going to be looking into because it is really a challenge. Ladies first.
Just, if I understand correctly, you use real data to test your application.
Not necessarily. So when we work with credit unions and we ask them for test accounts, we make them aware to either give us the accounts that are mocked, or if they are using the real accounts, to mask the sensitive data so that we don't see it. Yeah.
How do you manage the fluctuation of QA
Sorry, can you speak up a little bit?
I was wondering, how do you manage the fluctuation of the QA resource needs? Say sometimes business say, hey, we got big good ideas, we want to hit them up in 3 to 6 months, and you got a team functioning within that time frame.
So I didn't talk about resource management because that's something that our resource manager do. The fifth guy in the slide where Chloe was the AVP and we all report to her. So his name is Brad Aitken. He does the resource management for the whole organization. So what we do, we use Inotas. Inotas is the online tool that our project managers use to fill out the demand for each project. So they will say, for example, for PFM, I need 280 hours. And the month has about 140 hours that are realistic for a person, 147, 154, depending on whether you have holidays or not. In this time frame, we usually don't assign all 147 to a project, because your tester, or any other resource for that matter on your project, will have other things to do. So they will have some admin work. If they're full-time employees, mid-year, they will have mid-year reviews and year reviews. They might have some goals that they need to accomplish, improve the processes, and so on. So really it can become, we try to put it at about 110 to 120 hours for a project work. Because support works happens also together with the project. Then we try to see, sometimes some other projects might have less than 120 hours, so they might have only 50 hours of demand. So I can then say, well, you're going to be working 50 hours on this project and then 70 hours on support for this month. But we do allocation of the resources every month, and we all get together, line managers with the planning manager, and we review the projects that are on the roadmap. And then we also review the demand. And what I do is I look at what my demand is. This coming month, June, I'm actually 570 hours short, which is about 4 people. And so I had a talk with our resource and planning manager, and I said, these are the numbers. What is it that you want me to drop? But if you do it that way, at least you have some facts, right? And then we sit together, and he's like, well, I know this project, we're going to move a little bit, and it won't be as high demand, and don't worry about this one right now. Maybe assign only, they ask for 100 hours, but maybe you can assign only 50 so that they can fill out we're just starting, so they can at least go to sprint meetings and they can start doing something, but not the full work. So we're trying to manage. And that's why I said soon to be 2, because I got approval to hire 2 more people. So, that's how we deal with the resource management. It can be quite demanding, but I think if you have a good tool that you can use to show your managers what's the workload, and if the whole organization is on board, we are pretty lucky that way. Our senior management is pretty supportive of that way. Because it keeps clarity, right? It's not John said did and Julie said that, right? Like it
How far the visibility you plan for?
we do 3 months. So this month, at the end of May, we do for June, July, August. I do adjust also support hours. So for example, this upcoming month, we're going to be short on support for about 150 hours. But that gives development the idea that don't push as many changes because we can't move as much. We can't do that many. So it's a good communication tool, I think. It helps people to understand what the workload is and what is it that we are focusing on. And it also gives us the opportunity to understand where the priorities are. That being said, it doesn't necessarily mean that what's in Innotas is set in stone. We might get a client request that it's like they've been parked forever and now they come and it's like, can you do this next week? And then I go to product managers and I say, this resource is required because of the knowledge they needed in a time frame. What's the priority? Is it okay to drop something for a while and then move along? So communication cannot be replaced with a tool, right? Like you still have to do that. A tool is there just to support you and really move you forward. And when you have such an obvious difference between your demand and allocation, it really helps to show, right? In team of 18 testers, so 2 team leads, 16 testers, right? If I'm short 600 hours, I obviously cannot do as much. But if I'm short 150 hours, that's only about 10 hours per person. It's manageable, right? Like it's not, I don't have to go yelling and screaming, oh, I don't have a person, I can't do this work. 150 hours on a size of team could be doable, right? Even if you're short. Yeah?
Yeah, make you start answer to your top performance here, I guess.
Yeah.
So what's the major age group for most of your people and how long?
Age?
Yeah.
Oh, we have a mix. we have people that are really young and just almost kind of came out of school a few years ago. And then we have really seasoned testers that are, in their 40s, 50s. It's also a good mix between men and women. So it's, gender-wise, we are kind of balanced as well. Yeah, and it's a pretty cohesive group. I'm pretty proud of my team. I think we are one of the, that's probably why employee satisfaction is high, but we are one of the closest teams in the company. The spirit on the team is really high. People support each other. I also personally like to support my team members, especially if they deal with difficult situations at home. As a manager, I understand it can be really challenging and hard if you have whatever happening in your life, and life does get in the way. So we try to support our testers through that difficult time, and then not only me, but also the whole team. And that's something I'm really proud of, and I think we've done a really good job there.
Sorry for just abuse that.
Sure.
One of the supporting, but most important part of supporting is give them a career path that they kind of saying really fit their career goal, right? So for most of QA kind of management, but particularly QA is not going very far. Career development point of view. How do you motivate your team? Like, see, we want the people to perform well on the stage, right?
Yeah.
With particularly top performers.
Yeah.
So you mentioned some challenging tasks, stuff like that. Anything else that you can share?
Yeah, I think talking about as a manager, and I think there's 3 of them there, so maybe they can give you a little bit of their feedback as far as how they feel. But I think what I do as a manager for them, I really try to keep it flexible. I also try to listen very carefully what they say, and if they really have problems, understand what these problems are. And funny thing, on my performance review, I was told that I'm supporting my team too much. So I really try to do that. I think if you don't value somebody as a person, they will not produce the results. As I said, if you have difficult situation at home and I come and demand that you are at work from 9 to 5, you won't be working 100%. I'd rather you go home, deal with the situation, and come tomorrow. You're going to give me 110% then. So people understand. I'm very open with them. I'm very supportive of them. I don't necessarily need to know their details of their personal lives. If they want to share, I'll listen, but I don't demand that. But I need to know what's going on and why is it that they cannot perform. And then I'll do whatever I can to help them be where they need to be. I also was developing team and am developing team in a way that I try to build their communication skills. I think testers are often, same as developers, you might have a lot of introverts on your team. You might also have a lot of people that are kind of afraid to say their opinion. They're like, but PM, wants me to do that, or BA said that we need to do that. And I'm trying to encourage them to be equal part of the team. I think their opinion needs to count. And I think you need to be able to vocalize your concern in a respectful way with the facts, right? But I don't think you should be sitting and not saying what you think can happen if we don't do things in a certain way. Just because you might be afraid, or you might be kind of shy, or somebody shut you down before and you don't want to do that again. So building something on past experiences that might be negative is not necessarily a good thing, right? So they know that they can come to me, and if they don't feel comfortable, I'll see what the problem is and I'll go talk for them. So
we can take one more question, last question because of time constraint. So you may make.
Leo?
Yeah, my question is, so as I said, you have a lot of manual tests, and how or where you get the understanding of test coverage before you actually go to release to production?
So initially the test cases, when we were at the waterfall development, they were reviewed by the BA. So we would generate a report out of Silk and we would send it for review. Now with sprints, because you will have your daily scrums, right? As you create your tests, you can communicate with your team, and they will understand whether that's what you want. We are looking into doing, as we do more automation, as we are trying to implement more automation, we are looking into some tools to give us information about coverage. One of them is Callistic. So I just had a conversation today with Renee about how we can do that and how we can move forward, and what team members to assign to look into it and how to get it done.
Like, my question was, the coverage is mostly something on something, so this is what we expect to test and this is what we actually test. Do you manage this somehow? I understand that you get the idea of what should be testing on the daily scrums, as you said, but and with the regression testing, with the automated regression testing something, but is there anything else that you use for understanding what else needs to be tested before we actually say that there is nothing else?
Well, the test strategy is the one that gives you the overview, as I talked about, right? And then test cases, you will develop them slowly as you go and move through your sprints. And as you do that, your team will be there to support you. They will look whether this is sufficient enough to support your acceptance criteria, right? And then when you get to the point where you are like, okay, now these tests we want to move to regression suite, you would want to look which ones to pick. And you might work with the product manager on that, or you might work with a senior tester. If you want to automate, I would expect that you would work with automation engineer to help you automate those as well. We can take one more question if you don't mind.
Sure.
I wanted to know, going forward, if you have a
We do. Automation on its own is a bit of a challenge for a lot of people, not only for my organization. For automation to work, you need to have certain things laid out. And one of the challenge for us is the environments not being under our control. So that's definitely, with automation, you want to have a little bit more predictable states. You want to make sure that you do your test, run it, clear out the data and run it again if you require. When you don't own all pieces of environment, that becomes a bit of a challenge. Also with automation plan overall, when I started, we didn't have any automated regression tests. Now we have 5 credit unions with about 550 something test cases for the main functionality. There should be also understanding that automation is not replacement for manual tests. It's a support for your manual test, or manual test or support for your automation, whichever way, but they have to exist together. Simply because some of the things are just not worth automating. Not that you cannot do it, but they're not worth doing it. So we started to do some analysis on that. I think the first step is to set up the framework, decide the tool, set the standards. How is it that we want to do check-ins and check-outs of the code? What are the standards for coding? And then take certain projects in smaller chunks and see how that actually applies in practice. Do as we go, and then build a bigger plan out of that. But until we do that, it's you have to do it slowly in the steps. And you have to have support of your senior management. You also have to let them know that they should not expect that this will replace and reduce the cost of testing. I recently had an experience where when we were moving from daily builds to weekly builds to daily builds, and my question to them was, so you want me to run the BVT and the ART on a daily basis? Oh yeah, that would be great. I said, okay, I need at least one person be assigned to this all the time. So why do you need one person be assigned all the time? It's only 2 hours to run the regression. And you press the button and it goes. I'm like, yeah, you can press the button and go home and come tomorrow morning, but guess what? If the things are failing, you're gonna ask me why they're failing. And if I have 50 test cases failing, I don't know what caused this. Is it the banking host? Is it they messed up something with the code? Is it my script that's not working anymore? So we'll have to investigate. And that investigation could be from 5 minutes to 6 hours. So do you still want to do this? Oh, no, that's okay. We can do it once a week. So I think you need to be very factual about the things that, yes, it's doable. I'm not saying I can't do it, but this is a price to pay with this. Are you willing to pay that price? And you need to know how to vocalize that, because sometimes they don't get it, right? Okay.
So we have a feedback form, so I hope everyone has. So we would appreciate if you can fill this up and pass it on to Julie. And Ivana, you have to share something?
I have one thing more to share. First, I wanted to thank you all for coming tonight. You've been a great crowd. I hope you learned something, and I hope you could go back to your community or your corporation and apply some of these things. If you want, you can grab my business card here on the table and contact me with any questions you might have afterwards. But I also wanted to share with you recently in May, I'm originally from Croatia, my husband is from Serbia, and this region was extremely affected with the huge flooding. So as you can see, 300,000 households were affected, 350 without drinking water and electricity, 1 million people directly affected, and now landslides and disease pose threats in wake of this epic flood. So it's really, really affecting people. So no, it won't run now. But anyways, I was I was just going to ask you if you could consider to donate. Red Cross Canada has a way to donate. So if you could even donate $5, it will help tremendously to those people. Unfortunately, the images that I wanted to show you, we need to have some time for them to run. But essentially, this blue region is basically everything's underwater. So the whole villages and towns were being washed out. And it's really a challenge. People lost everything. As you remember, probably in 2000, back in 1990s, there was a war there, and the perception now is that the war didn't do as much damage as this flooding did. And what actually happened is people started to unite themselves. So they working closer with each other. There is help coming from region not affected to different ones. So this is the link. You can go there to crisislifecenter.org, 2014 Balkan, donate, or just go to any of these. And I would like to thank you in the name of those affected if you consider donating for them. So thank you very much.